everybody, welcome along to Percussion Discussion. First of all, as I always ask, please check out our social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and of course, our world famous YouTube channel. If you wouldn't mind subscribing, please do. It really helps. And this way ensures that you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes that we've got or any of the fabulous episodes that have already been. If you'd rather listen on the go, you can find all of our conversations in podcast form, and you can find those to download on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts. So if that's your thing, please do it. Leave us a review if you can. Only takes a couple of seconds. And again, really appreciate it. On to today's guest, an incredibly talented guy all round in several fields. You may have seen him on television, an incredibly talented actor. You've seen him in things like Bodies, The History of Tom Jones, Mad Dogs, Suits, to name but a few. I can't remember the others off the top of my head. But we're not here to talk about acting today. As well as being a ridiculously talented actor, he's an incredible musician, a fabulous percussionist and a drummer and a great pianist as well. He's played for the likes of Brand New Heavies, Paul Weller, Take That, Jamiroquai, Incognito, just some incredible names. Also, he's played piano on stage for his good pal, Robbie Williams. Just sickeningly talented, what can I say? And to top it off, he's a really nice guy. Gives me great pleasure to welcome the fabulous Mr. Max Beesley. So Max, thanks for doing this, mate. It's dead kind of you.
Thank you ever so much for asking me. I appreciate it.
Oh, it's a total pleasure. It is. And I have to say, before we get into it, we have to thank our mate Dave Walsh for hooking us up. So thanks, Dave. Great drummer that he is as well.
He's phenomenal. Dave and I went to school together from the age of like 10 and a half, till 18. And I watched as a player, quite important in my work as a player. In as much really that he was technically much more proficient than I was as a kid, and he developed so quick with his technique that I always say that, oh no, I wanted to set out to be a session player that just could be in the pocket and groove. Yeah. But really, it was because I couldn't do some of the stuff Dave was doing. So that was an excuse,
Oh, brilliant. No, he's certainly a great player. So thanks, Dave. I'm sure you'll be watching this. I appreciate it. No, he's a great player. And I appreciate you doing it, mate, because I know you're busy. But anybody who's watching, if they think they're going to get an hour of acting talk, I'm afraid not. I totally respect you as an actor, but today it's all about drums. So
Great.
So look, I want to start off with, obviously it's been a bit of a weird couple of years, but you released an album, didn't you, in 2020, your own solo album?
Yeah, well, actually, it didn't get released, but I did record it.
Yeah.
Yes, and I recorded. I was quite bored, and so I was writing sort of like an orchestral thing, and then each movement I realised had forms for a song. Yeah, and sort of the top line violins really were very good for melodies, and so I started working on that premise. And for this specific album, I did have players in mind that I wanted to bring into the studio in LA. I did call Steve Gadd, who I know you've had on the show, who I love. He's one of my favourite players and musicians. But he was down for it, and then he went out with the late Chick Corea, so he couldn't do it. And by default, that actually made me have to go and record myself. And that was great. It was good to get back into the playing, Sure. But yeah, I did that album, and I reached out to some friends of mine that I'd worked with over the years, solo artists. And all of them, thankfully, said, yeah, we'll come in and sing on it. And so I've yet to find it a home, but I do think it's a lovely album. And it was just brilliant getting in the studio and flexing those muscles after just being with the acting like that for so long. It's just wonderful.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, some heavyweight vocals on there as well. I mean, Tommy Blaze might not be a household name with some, but I certainly know his ability,
Well, Tommy did the demo for me.
Yeah.
And I asked Gregory Porter if he would sing it because I love his voice.
Yeah.
And he couldn't do it because he was going out on the road the weeks that we were going in the studio. And I just kept listening to it going, hold on a second, Tommy sounds fantastic. He's wonderful on it.
Yeah.
And so I was like, Tommy, is it all right if I use your demo? He's like, yeah, mate, no problem, because he's wonderful, you know. And Tommy was great. Lisa Stansfield was the first artist to say yeah, which was lovely, and I went and recorded her in Rochdale.
Yeah.
Fred Durst, he was, you know, it's quite diverse, the album. Fred came in and he's got a great ear for arrangement and stuff like that, and that was very, very impressive. Robbie I went over to Rob's house and I just did 2 takes with Rob, and I felt I had it. Yeah, it was very quick, you know. And then, of course, my favourite was Weller, because many years ago I played on the Wildwood album, and and one of the tracks we did was called Moon on Your Pajamas, which was written for his little boy Nat, who's now a grown man, you know.
Yeah.
And I'd written a song for my daughter, a song for Sabrina, and I just thought it was apt that I asked Paul if he would sing it, and he came, sang it beautifully, and then we had the legendary Al Schmitt mix the album. Wow. Bless his soul, you know. And
great.
It was just a wonderful gentleman, you know. And he put Paul's vocal, you know, I don't know if you know, but at Capitol there are these vaults in the basement. There are like 4 big chambers,
right? And
what you would do is you'd feed the vocal down, record it down in there, and that would be your natural reverb. And Al didn't work with EQs. It was what mics he would use on each instrument would be his EQs, you know. And I must say, Paul's vocals absolutely beautiful. I can't wait for people to hear the tune.
Well, let's hope it's released, because it seems an awful waste to be sitting there in the can just gathering dust, doesn't it?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I mean, to have the late Al Schmitt, I mean, they don't get any bigger and better than that, do they? Let's be honest. The stuff he's done over the years.
No, and you know what was the most amazing thing about Al was I met him, and I went to Capitol to meet him because he has his studio there. And Steve Grenwick's his sort of right hand man with all of the mixes and stuff, and he's a brilliant engineer himself, Steve.
Yeah.
And what was amazing was Al was he treated me like he was talking to McCartney or Diana Krall, and I'd never met him. Sure. And all that was important to him was the music. And he said, I really like the music, and I'd love to mix it. And I'm like, thank you so much, you know. And that's the mark of a true legend, somebody so revered.
Yeah.
Just treating you as a human and being lovely. And I was incredibly sad when he passed away. We spoke sort of every other week, really. I checked in on him, see how he was doing, and it was honoured that he was a part of it.
Yeah, well, it must have been one of the last albums he had anything to do with, I'd imagine.
I think he did. He did. After that, I mean, this sounds ridiculous. He did mine, and then he did Bob Dylan, McCartney, and he did another Diana Krall one. Mine will be on the bottom of those 4. But you know, he was brilliant, man. Lovely.
Oh, amazing. I mean, I you know, mixing with people like that, you know, if you'll pardon the pun, is just, it doesn't get any better than that for my book, you know, for those experienced ears that he's got. And it's just incredible. Well, let's hope it comes out and we can hear it.
Yes, hope so.
It seems a shame. So let's go back a little bit. So where did it all begin, the percussion thing for you?
Well, I grew up in South Manchester in Burnage, and my dad was a drummer, and he was a drummer in a band called the Strand Show Band that were the Belfast Show Band.
Yeah,
he's a terrific player, my dad, and my mother was a jazz singer. And she used to sing with the Phil Moss Band at the Ritz and all, you know, all that kind of stuff in the late 60s and 70s. And my father put a pair of drumsticks in my hand when I was 3. And I've got pictures with my hands on bongos when I was 4. And then they both decided at about 6 it would be important to get piano lessons. And actually, from their point of view at that point, I think it was just a case of if he can play piano, he'll always be able to earn dough. You know, it was a survival thing, really, because South Manchester in the 70s, it was a poor part of town, you know. And then as I got older, the options like 8, 9, 10, still doing piano lessons and playing a bit of drums. The options for the next school were coming up, and I think they were terrified that I'd end up at Burnage Grammar. And of course, Cheethams School of Music in Manchester, they kind of thought, oh, he'll get in there, he can play a bit of piano. And we didn't really realise the standard of the children there. You know, at 10 and 11, they're playing Messiaen and, you know, the ridiculous pianist. And so I wasn't good enough to get a scholarship as a pianist there, but I got in as a chorister.
Okay.
And what they do at Cheethams is, after your voice breaks, they re-audition you, and if you're proficient on an instrument, they'll accept you, and if not, unfortunately, you know, you have to find another school. Yeah. So we had the idea that I'd study percussion. And tune percussion, and piano was a second instrument because I knew I wasn't up to the level of some of the kids that were my age there. And then thankfully at 13, you know, they said, we give you a scholarship to stay here, and that developed over the next 5 or 6 years, and it was a wonderful time at Cheethams. Fantastic time.
The thing is that those piano lessons early on have just led you nicely to tune, haven't they? To tune percussion, to mallet percussion. It's perfect, isn't it? It's like it's meant to be.
It's a great point, Matty. The tune percussion and piano, drums and piano, is the perfect marriage for that, you know. And as I've developed more recently, I mean, I've not played vibes really for 15, 20 years, but over the last 2 years, I've been shedding them, you know, quite nearly every day. And the interesting thing is, from when you're playing jazz piano and you've got these voicings just in that left hand, and then you've got your right hand playing your soaring lines here, to bring that onto 4 mallets and voice how you want, and it's not a touch thing, you know, your mallets are off the instrument, so it's a very different discipline. But the oxymoron being, of course, it is the perfect thing to go to, you know. But when we were at Cheethams, I do remember I said to the teacher, I feel like the percussion department are kind of not really revered like the violinists or the cellist playing Elgar or the pianists playing Rachmaninoff, you know. And I was like, can we get our tuned instrument like really up there? And why don't we play Paganini violin concertos or Bach flute sonatas? And we had a guy there that was a really good player called Graham Johns, an Australian, I think.
Yeah. I've met Graham,
He was a lovely man. And he went, all right, let's get some bark out, get the vibes out. And he started, that was it. And I think now that the percussionists there, they do a lot on the tune percussion, which is great.
Oh, that's amazing. So you're to blame for a lot of that. That's amazing.
Well, maybe a little bit. So one of his students came back the other day, reached out to me and said, Mr. Johns was talking about you. I've heard this story numerous times now at school. And he says, because basically what I used to do is I never practiced, and then he'd come in and I'd sight read, and I got away with it for about 2 months, and then he clicked on and he went, you're a very good sight reader, but you're wasting my time, so I'm going to go and get a cup of tea. And it was a great lesson because I felt terrible that he'd walk out, and so then I practiced a bit, you know.
Yeah, of course. But what a skill to have, to sight read at that ability is.
Yeah, reading was good.
Pretty unique, isn't it? You know, especially on tune stuff as well. It's amazing. So, I mean, that's a great grounding straight away, isn't it? So when did the actual, away from tune stuff, when did the percussion thing take hold? Was that at the same time?
It was drums first, and it was about when I was about 11 or 12. I can't quite remember, but an album came out called Rufus and Shaka Live at the Savoy.
Yes.
And it's JR on drums. Yeah. And I listened to that, Stomping at the Savoy. I listened to that album and went, oh, that's it. That's what it's all about. That groove, you know. Yeah. And so from about 12 to 15, I'd just sit at home, and every day after school, I'd play along to those tracks. And the other artist I used to play to a lot of Al Jarreau. I used to play to loads of Al's albums. Yeah. And then at 15, the school did a big orchestral gig with Michel Legrand. And they said, yeah, we were going to have a drummer. Would you? I says, yeah. And this idea that I had of session drumming, being able to mix this with an orchestral classical setting, it happened. And I'm on a click. I'm in the middle of the orchestra. I started buying into the whole idea of this being a session drummer, you know.
Sure.
And that continued. And, you know, I remember at that school, we were all, my friend Jeremy, who's a terrific bass player, Dave Walsh, who we mentioned earlier, we were listening to the newest Yellow Jackets records. And then some old school stuff, you know, Spyro Gyra, but we'd be really tuning into what was being released. We were big on Metheny. We used to listen to Pat Metheny's releases and a lot of Steely Dan in those days as well. I mean, we were kids listening to all of this, you know. And so by the time I left Cheethams, I went in for all the colleges. Like, I wanted to I didn't think I'd get in any. Mm-hmm. But I got in all of them, thankfully, and then I had a choice, and so I said I'll go to the Guildhall because it seems quite relaxed and
sure.
Yeah, and then after a year there, I was playing with the Jazz Warriors. I was playing vibraphone with the Jazz Warriors, and a guy came up to me after the gig that I would later know as Stevie White.
I spoke to Steve about this the other day. Actually.
Did you?
On a chat with him, yeah. So yeah, he told me about this.
Well, he said, do you play keyboards? I says, yeah. I mean, I did, obviously, but I wasn't like every day. Like, I was, oh, yeah. He said, listen, I'm in a band and the guy's looking for a sort of like keyboard player and he likes vibraphone as well, actually. Would you be able to come for an audition? I says, yeah. Where? And I was just blagging it, you know. I was like, no problem.
Yeah.
Said it's at Solid Bond Studios. You get off the Marble Arch tube, come down to Solid Bond, and Guy will be there, and he'll probably want you to play with him a bit. And I'm like, okay. And I think at that point we'd been auditioning at No Miss Studios for different bands that were going out, Simply Red or Jason, whoever it was. We were doing auditions as they used to have you walking in a room like an acting audition, and you'd play along with the tracks. You know, awful.
Yeah.
And I didn't know who Paul was. And then the night before, I got a call saying there's a party. So come down and meet Paul from Steve, I think. And I went down. I didn't know anyone. I was a young kid, man. I was 18, you know, and all that was on my mind was, how am I going to get back to Catford on the train at night? Oh. And Paul walked past and I went, oh gosh, it's him. Yeah, I recognize him. Okay. And he just exuded charisma, like, you know.
Yeah.
And he said, hello, see you tomorrow. And I said, okay. And then I went back the next day. And Dad was a wonderful man, John. And he said, Paul's in the studio, walk in. I said, okay. So I got in and he went, sit down. He said, just play along. And he started playing That's Entertainment on the acoustic.
Okay. Yeah.
And started playing along. Then he played something else, Head Start. I can't remember what it was. And he said, I'll see you in a minute. Walked back to his dad, came back and said, go and see me dad. And then his dad just went, basically, Paul wants you to do the gig. It's a monkey a week. I went, yeah. Nice. Sort out all the clothes. Yeah. And I was like, wow. And so I had due diligence. I went to the principal of the Guildhall and I said, Ian Horsbury, who's called, never forget. I said, I've been given this opportunity to go out and put into practice what we're doing here. Could I take it? And if it doesn't work, may I have my place? And he went, absolutely.
Oh,
so,
brilliant.
Yeah, that was it. Sorry, I'm rambling, but yeah, there you go.
No, that's not rambling. That's you know, that's the way it is, and that's the way people should hear it, I think, anyway. But isn't that?
Yeah, Whitey was great. Whitey was great. You know, we got on great.
I mean, isn't that lovely though that you could have had your place back if it had gone, you know?
I think that's paramount. If he would have said no, I would have considered that job and thought I probably would have stayed at college.
Yeah.
You know, but he gave me that opportunity, which is great.
And that band of that era was really, really good as well. It was a great band, wasn't it?
I just remember I really loved what Steve was doing. There was a guy on bass, Paul, I've forgotten his surname now, a terrific kid. Mm-hmm. And Gerard Presenter, Jack O'Peak on sax and trumpet, I think. Some good musicians, but it was a roast, you know, learning those tunes. And trying to get your head around it. And on numerous occasions, I would forget changes on the rows, and Paul, the clock it. He's got great ears, and he'd give me the eyes, and I'd be like, oh God, because I was 18, man.
Yes, kid, as you say. Yeah. I mean, Steve wouldn't have been. Steve's probably about 6 years older, I guess. Maybe
5. Yeah, Steve was only young. I think he joined even earlier at 17 and a half or something. I can't remember.
Yeah, well, it was Style Council, wasn't it, with Steve? Or Weller as a solo entity. And but Steve's great. I mean, it must have been great to lock in with Steve, because he's kind of got a bit of a unique voice all of his own, hasn't he, on drums? It's a bit old school, but
Yeah, he's got a great mixture of. He's so technically proficient.
Yeah,
he's got great musical ears. So he plays, for me, he's a very musical drummer. Yeah. But he can dig in, and he's also technically got it. So he's got the full bag, really. And I mean, that was, as you know, if you're a percussionist working with the drummer, that was a very, very different gig for me than, say, Incognito, where you're working with a drummer, because I was mostly keyboard, so I just enjoy Steve's playing. When you're on another gig like Incognito, then I would ring Richard Bailey, Richard did mostly, Andy Gangadin did a bit, Tony did a bit, but I'd ring Richard and say, let's do 4 days together before the band come in, and let's work out the spaces and where. And that would be a full, focused week of work where the voices don't clash, and you help and support, or you come out and do nothing, which is obviously really important.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that. I was going to ask about that, because I've spoken to a few percussionists, and that's one thing I always ask about is, how do you find the space? Do you do it as a section and just say, look, let's take them apart and put them back together again? And that's cool.
I think it's threefold. I think that first of all, obviously you've got the records as references. And for that gig in particular, it was a terrific percussionist called Thomas Diani, who's a great player. But studio recording, as you'll know, and live playing is slightly different. You're very economical in the studio. And you should be economical on a gig, but there might be certain things that need lifting. There may be a new horn arrangement. There may be new, but with Richard and I, we really got that gig nailed. So we were holding each other's hands on the gig, and it was fantastic. Great gig. But
there's some great live footage, and I was watching it last week, in fact, and it was always there. And there's a blistering vibes solo. Well, it's like, is it a mallet cat or something?
Oh gosh, yeah, I've seen that. It was that bloody mallet cat. I don't like him.
For what it was, it sounded pretty cool, I have to say. It was.
Yeah. God, when was that? What, 92 or something?
Yeah, I guess it must have been. Yeah, but whatever you think of the gear, the solo was. Yeah.
Oh well, that's nice of you. I was a kid, man. I didn't know what I was doing. But Bluey from that band was wonderful, because he used to keep musicians working. And we were struggling, man, to earn money, and it would be either an Incognito album, or we did he was producing George Benson, the guitarist, and he's like, let's get the guys in, let's bring them all in. That's the first time I met Steve, actually.
Is it really?
And I reminded him of it when I spoke to him a few weeks ago. I'm like, brother, it's 30 years ago. And he's like, what, really? But then he went, was Bluey producing there? And I says, yeah. And he remembered it, and it was Steve came in, and it was a waltz that I'd written for George. It's an interesting thing, this, so I must tell this story really quick. But Bluey fundamentally would always make sure we were all earning as musicians, and he does to this day. I see that he has a fold of musos that he always looks after. He's a wonderful man, But on that session with George, it was a waltz, and Bluey's like, who do you want getting on drums? He said, I know you like Steve Gadd. I said, yeah, get him in. He's like, well, we'll try. So he must have been in London, because it worked out, and he came in on the first track, which was this track I'd written, and he was overdubbing, he was tracking the drums, and it was a waltz, brushes, like just ridiculous, beautiful, wonderful playing.
Written for him. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And then as the track's going down, I'm like, Lou, we've not told him it goes into a bossa on the outro. It goes into 4 on the outro. What? And he went, oh, don't worry. I says, well, I can't say anything. Can you say over the... He says, no, let's just leave it. We get to the outro, and I'll never, ever forget it. It's like 1, 2, 3, 2, 2. Then it goes dung, dung. Then it goes like into a full bossa from a swung, you know. It was a semi-quaver of the second beat, and his ears went, boom. He went, ting, 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 and I could not believe it. He just dropped in, and it was just fantastic to watch, you know.
And was that the take? That was the one?
Sim. Yeah, that's the take. Yeah.
Wow.
So there you go.
Oh, dear me. It's just, these stories are phenomenal, aren't they? You know, and you don't get them unless you're talking person to person. Well, Zoom to Zoom, if you like.
Yeah.
But, you know, and it's nice that these stories are shared, and they're there forevermore now, aren't they? They're there in history, which is just, I love hearing this stuff. I really do. I mean, speaking of Gadd, you've got a new solo offering in the recording at the moment, haven't you?
Yeah.
With a Gadd on drums and Luis Conte on percussion as well. Is that right?
Yes. So again, you know, this last thing, I was sitting there going, I'm going to do a high vibe album. I did like an EP years ago, and it was all right, you know, and a couple of tracks came out. It was fine, but I went, no, I want to write some tunes and feature the vibes, but really think about the arrangements and the horns and the sounds, and make it not just a jazz funk album, make it something quite different, and you know. Yeah. And so I wrote the tracks, which I was happy with, and I sent some of the arrangements to my friend Nicole Thompson, who works with Tommy Walsh, a horn player and trombonist out in London, that do most of the stuff I do.
Yeah,
I said take some liberties with it, because he comes up with some fantastic lines, you know, like, and they sent it back, and then I was like, I just want to get my favourite players in, and so I can just focus on the vibes, because the early high vibes albums, I'd end up playing everything. Yeah. I mean, I don't play guitar or bass, but I play Rhodes and drums, but I thought, no, I just want to focus on the instrument. And I called Steve first and sent him the demos, and he said, tracks sound great, let's go. So that was that. And then Lewis I called, and Lee Mullen that you mentioned earlier, Lee put me in contact with Lewis.
Yeah.
And he loved it. He said, yeah. And then I was struggling for a guitarist, and initially this was going to be a whole band live recording.
Sure.
We'd all go in and we'd play live. I'm kind of glad that it's ended up the way it has, which is my family we all got COVID.
Right. Okay.
The day of the session, so I had to do it from Zoom. I couldn't be in with. But what we did is we decided to do individual musicians, half a day, then we get, and it was better because we could really focus on what was being played, like, you know. I couldn't find it. I was struggling for a guitarist, like, for that sound that I wanted, that Watson's, you know, Cornell Dupree, you know, Earl Clue, you know, those players.
Yeah.
And it was Michelle, Steve's manager, actually, that said, "Have you thought about Dean Parks?" And I said, I know Dean Parks. Why do I know Dean Parks? And she just started laughing. And then I looked up Dean's discography, and I was like, oh, okay, that's why I know him. And I mean, he's on just everything, you know, all the Steely records that I love.
Yeah.
Let's Get It On, Marvin, Innervision, Stevie, songs that, I mean, just everything, you know. So we got Dean, which was great. And then a friend of mine is a terrific player, a keyboard player called Christian Sands. And Christian was on the last album. Okay. And he's a Grammy-nominated player. This boy's like phenomenal.
Yeah.
And most of his gigs are like bebop. He's my favourite jazz pianist alive at the moment. You know, I love his playing.
Yeah.
But I said to him, this is kind of headhunters-y. It's quite, how's that? And he went, no, that should be fine. I've just been out actually with the sort of Headhunters band, so I kind of know those. I felt like an idiot. He's been touring with like some of the Headhunters musos, you know.
Oh dear.
But yeah, so we've done nearly all of it. But I go in this week 10 till 1 to record all the vibes, the heads and the blowing. Sure. And then Steve's 1 till 8 to record the drums, and then Walt Fowler's 8 till 10 just to do some of the heads on flugel and trumpet. So
you're not messing.
Very lucky.
You're not messing about.
No, they're lovely, and Luis is terrific, and they're just guys that want the hang is as important as the music, probably more important for these guys, because there's nothing they've not really done, so they won't know what's the session like. And I know that they might talk and go, how was it? Was it a pain in the arse? Was it okay? And I know, you know, so it's just great, man. It's great that we can all have a good hang.
Well, I'll tell you what, you better release this album.
No, this one will get a deal, because there's a marketplace for it. And also, I said to my music manager the other day, Jan Mullen, who's terrific, I said, Japan's massive for this. And I used to tour there all the time. Yeah. Let's just put something together for like a 3-week next year. Take the time off acting, and because it's a blistering set. It's high energy, and the horn arrangements are just wonderful. And so we've been having fun thinking about putting a band together, because I don't think I'll get everyone to come out on the road. You know what I mean? So
you never know.
You never know.
You never know. Well, I tell you what, I look forward to hearing.
I'll send it you, man.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing the fruits of that. That's
really
right
pleased with it. Yeah, I'm pleased with it. I'm very lucky.
I've been a fan of Vibes for quite some time, and I'm back in, I think it was 90s. I had an album by Orphy Robinson, Vibes Described. I don't know if you remember the album, but it was a really good album.
No, but I remember Orphy, because Orphy was the Vibes player before I was in the Jazz Warriors. And then Orphy left. I think he must have left to promote his solo stuff, because that must have been the album, perhaps, if it was like 1991.
Yeah.
And so I knew of Orphy, and actually there were only a few players, Orphy and a lovely man called Roger Beaujolais, who was a lovely player.
Okay.
And I think, is it Anthony Kerr as well?
Yes.
But then the only other guy that I was like, that's kind of like what, because you're always trying to find a role model, aren't you? And I'm like, was Victor Feldman, where I was like, drums, percussion, and vibes. And he came over to Los Angeles in the 70s, and he ended up recording on everything. You know, he did a lot of work, you know. Yeah. But it's a beautiful instrument. It
really is, and you know, it's nice to see that it's still there's still people like yourself, you know, pushing it and doing stuff with it, and so I look forward to hearing it. Now, look, I want to ask you about something, and this is you know how little birds talk, and you hear rumors and things about stuff that's happened, and it's like Chinese whispers. And I heard from somebody who heard from somebody about a jam session that involved Stevie Wonder late one night in a studio. Did this happen? Was this a real thing, or has Chinese whispers got out of control?
No, it's totally true.
Oh,
it's totally true, man. Yes. I was in Chalfont, Little Marlow, staying at the time with an ex-girlfriend, and the phone went at like 1 a.m, and it was Omar. Yeah. He's one of my best skill friends. He said, Stevie's coming in the studio. I need a drummer. Do you want to do it? And I went, bro, I'm in Oxfordshire. It's 1 a.m. He ain't coming in. He said, brother, it's up to you. He's coming in, man. Take the risk. And I was like, I've got to go. I said, I'm coming in. So I drove him to the studio. I got there at like 2 a.m. He's still not there. And there was a hive, a buzzing. It was Jerry's studio, Jerry Meehan's studio, Wendy House Studios, and there was a load of like 12 of us in there, just buzzing, going, "What's this going to be?" And it was 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. He's still not there. And a couple of the musicians dropped off and said, "Nah, he's not going to come." And it left myself, Jerry, the bass player, Omar, a chap called Glenn Nightingale, who's a phenomenal guitarist. Donny was there, I think. There was a few musicians left. I can't remember everyone. And at 4 a.m. he walked in.
Oh.
And it was amazing. It was wonderful because, you know, we all love him and have all been influenced by him, obviously. And he sat down and he said, drummy. And I'm in the booth going, fuck, yep. And he starts singing me this beat. And I'm like, it's very straightforward. Normally, you wouldn't have a problem with it, but I'm panicking a bit for some reason. And when he's singing it, I'm in my head, I'm going, Anyway, I started playing it, and then he sings Jerry the line. He starts playing it, and he starts playing Rhodes. And then we just recorded, and we recorded for about an hour and a half, and it was just amazing. It was great to play with it, man.
Just pure jamming.
No. We made a tune,
right? Okay.
And then Omar sang with it. Then he had Stevie singing on it. Then we edited it, and it ended up. I thought it was going to be one of Stevie's records. It ended up being on Omar's record. But sing if you're winning. I think it's on that. I can't remember the name of the sing. I think it's called.
Right.
But it was just. I mean, we listen now to the playing. It's all right. It's not like the very on it, but we were quite nervous, you know, and it was an impromptu thing, but a wonderful experience.
I mean, the musicians who left must have been like, oh man.
There was a bass player that left. I mean, a terrific bass player, this kid, right? But I'm like, and my friend Jerry's going, oh, I'll just let him play. And I'm going, are you insane? You're playing bass. Let's go. And then this lovely lad he's a good mate of ours. He left. And then I went, right, get on it. And he taken liberties. He started playing licks from Inner Visions. And I'm going, But it was wonderful. And Glenn Nightingale, who doesn't play very much anymore, I don't think, he's a vivacious character, Glenn, and he's full of energy. But like he was like, Stevie, let me put another one in on there for you, man. Let me track that. And I'm going, because we were quite scared, you know, and he didn't care. And it ended up being fantastic. His playing was great. You know?
Oh, this is just, can you imagine? I mean, so how old would you been at this point, Max?
Oh gosh, I don't know, probably 28, 29. Yeah.
And Stevie Wonder rolls in.
Yeah. It's the only time I played with him, actually. You know, some of the other ones, like Shaka, I've worked with a few times, but like people like that. But that's the only time we played with Stevie. And I wanted to try and get him on the album playing harmonica on the track that Paul sang.
Yes.
Couldn't get hold of him. Just couldn't get hold of him, you know. But a riff that was, and such a treat to have been a part of it, you know.
Ah, just incredible. I mean, and I have to ask, I said I wasn't going to mention the acting side, but was there ever a point where it was going to be one or the other, or was it always going to be both?
Oh, no, had to be a very, very, very strict choice of acting.
Yeah.
The agent was like, my agent, who I'm still with, is funny. She said to me, the music has to go, obviously. And I went, what? She went, yeah, you won't be taken seriously. If you want to do this, you have to be 100%.
Yeah.
And I went, and I'd done a mime with George Michael on drums, and I was recording with Benson in the studio, and things were firing, you know, things were like,
yeah. And
I said, okay. And so I just stopped. And then all the lads that were mates, percussionists and stuff, nicking gigs that was on, and they were all steaming in, you know, like sharks. And eventually I was like, well, there's nothing left. They've all gone, so I'm going to have to act like, you know. And then it was only years later, we were doing Nebworth with Robbie Williams, that I said, why don't you come to this gig? And she came, and after the show, she came up to me, she said, oh my God, I cannot believe I told you to stop playing. I thought you just like played around in a pub and
right.
No, you know.
Yeah, I mean,
but the great thing is, Matty, sorry to interject, but great thing is that acting and music they really inform each other so much. Like when you're acting on set, you got to convey things, but less is always more. And the most important thing with TV and film, any acting, is listening. That is the most important nuance to have. And, you know, a lot of actors don't do it. They think about the lines, they preempt things before they hear what their person opposite them say. And that listening is so important. How great is that for when you're then in the studio? It's all that.
Yeah.
And I heard Steve talking about it. If you can do something less, but it's as poignant and there, do it. Just do that, man. And just simple. It's, you know, it's so important. And so they work well together, actually. And it's nice to now have I'm looking to be able to go, well, I need to go and act to make wages to support my family. But then I can indulge in music on the, you know, and I've done gigs. I don't care. I'll get in the van here and go and do a gig for $30.
Yeah.
But just to have a play, I'm like, beautiful. Yeah. What a great night. In fact, I've done gigs where I'm out 25 quid because I've had no gas in the car. And I'm like, it was still great. Yeah. I put me back out lugging the gear, but what a nobble, you know.
Ah, brilliant. It's lovely to hear that you've still got the enthusiasm for it. And
yeah.
I mean, let's be honest. You know, you've climbed to the top of the tree in both professions, and amazing to be able to say you've done that. And, you know, good on you. And the fact that you're so down to earth and humble still with it is a credit to you. So thanks for that.
Listen, man, it's nice of you to say that. I'm not quite sure that, I mean, I with the music, certainly there's a lot to, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? I used to suffer from perfectionism, you know, and it's a terrible plight to have that perfectionism, and you're never quite happy with what you're good at. You're not quite happy with your development. You're always comparing to other players, and then years ago, not that many years ago, about 8 or 9 years ago, I just said to myself, you're not the best percussionist in the world or the best vice player in the world, but you're a good, very good multi-instrumentalist. I'll say good, take the very out. You're a good multi-instrumentalist. And I went, I'm happy with that, man. I'm really happy with that, you know, and I feel very fortunate that I can. That sounded so arrogant. I didn't mean that to sound arrogant.
It didn't.
I am a good multi-instrumentalist. I'll own that. Because you go and see a play that you go, I'll never, ever, ever be able to play like that. So, all right, I'll just do my best. And that's all you can do, man, you know.
But the thing is, people will book you for what you do, not for what you can't do. Did you know? Does that make sense?
That's a great point. It's a great point.
Yeah, that's the way I mean, I know my limitations, and they're about here somewhere. But you know,
same.
But I've always believed in that. They'll book you because it's you they want, not, you know, if they want Vinny or they want someone else, they'll book them. I guess that's the way I always think about it.
Do you know what? I agree 100%. And this recent album, there was a couple of date problems with Steve and Jerry and I were talking. I'm like, it's the sound and the man and the feel, and that is this record. And you could easily get us a number and put him in for this, but no, it's not. That's not the way you want to operate. You want something that's true to you. It's a tailor-made musician that you want.
Yeah,
and then hopefully you do the dance in the studio, and you know where to give them space, and you know where to ask for when there are specific things that you actually do want as a producer. You know, you got to be able to ask for them. You know what I mean? Yeah. But so with all those date problems, I said, well, we'll have to wait.
Yeah.
We'll have to wait.
And I bet that's been the story of Steve's life, isn't it? You know, well, I can't do it. If you want it, you'll have to wait. Simple as that. And what a nice position to be in, eh?
And he's very accommodating. He's awfully accommodating, and he's you know, it's just like I say, at the same with Al Schmitt. Those people that have attained such a high level of professionalism, they're the ones that I've met in my life that I just go, wow, you're inspiring, you're very humble, and that'll do for me, you know.
Hey,
you know what I mean?
Something we can all try and aim for, isn't it? Let's be honest. Look, Max, I know you've got a busy day. I can't thank you enough for chatting to me. It's really kind of you.
Brother, it's all right. If anything else you missed to ask, then please go ahead. We're all right for a bit, but I've enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed. I've talked too much.
That's the whole idea, to tell you the truth. If I get someone to talk, it's kind of, oh no. So no, it's superb, because it does happen from time to time. But you know, it's been a pleasure, mate. It really has, and great to virtually meet you anyway. So
well, Matty, thank you for taking the time out of your day, mate. I do appreciate it. It's lovely of you.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. Well, hopefully we'll see you over in the UK, maybe doing something. Who knows?
For sure.
Top man. Cheers, Max. Thank you, mate.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you. See you next time. Bye-bye.